what does this verse actually say?
Well, basically, Shankaracharya is arguing that wealth itself can be a source of misery, not happiness.
Okay, so already kind of turning things upside down here.
Right. It's this idea that it creates like a cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. You're always striving for more, never quite feeling content.
I can see that. I can see how that would happen.
Yeah.
But isn't that just like a problem for the super rich? You know,
Yeah.
people who have like way more than they could ever need.
That's a common thought. But the interesting thing is the verse actually highlights that this isn't just a rich people problem.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Shankaracharya specifically mentions that even those with wealth experience fear.
Interesting.
Like fear of losing it, fear for their children's well-being, a constant sense of insecurity. Like wealth can't buy peace of mind.
That's so true. It's like even if you have just a little bit, you know, you're worried about holding on to it.
Right. It's human nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about like how obsessed we can get with what we own.
Yeah.
You know, I've definitely fallen into that trap of thinking like, if I just had that one thing, then I'd be so much happier.
Yeah, we all have.
Right.
And that's a classic example of how Maya operates. The illusion of reality. It tricks us into believing that happiness lies in acquiring more when actually true happiness comes from within.
Okay. Hold on, Maya. I've heard that term before, but can you break it down for me?
Sure. So think of it like a veil that prevents us from seeing the true nature of reality.
Okay.
It makes us believe that these fleeting external things, you know, like wealth, relationships, possessions, they're the source of lasting happiness.
Right.
But those things are constantly changing. So our happiness becomes dependent on these external factors. And that leads to anxiety and dissatisfaction.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all connects. So if wealth is part of this illusion, what does that mean for those of us who are, you know, constantly striving for financial security? Like, aren't we all kind of playing into this Maya thing?
In a way, yes. But the first step in breaking free from the illusion is becoming aware of it.
Okay, so awareness is key. Got it.
Right. And recognizing that our desire for wealth is often driven by a deeper fear of scarcity or insecurity.
So how does that fear connect to the idea of wealth actually bringing more misery?
Well, think about it. The more attached you are to your wealth, the more you fear losing it.
Right.
Every fluctuation in the market, every unexpected expense, it becomes a source of stress.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of experiencing the joy of abundance, you're constantly worried about scarcity.
It's like the more you have to lose, and that fear can really take over.
Exactly. And that fear prevents us from experiencing true contentment, from appreciating the non-material things that actually bring lasting joy.
So it's like we're caught in this vicious cycle, striving for wealth to find happiness, but then the wealth itself brings more anxiety and fear, which keeps us from actually finding that happiness. It's tough.
It is, and it's something that so many people experience.
Yeah, it feels pretty universal, even for people who aren't necessarily wealthy in the traditional sense.
Oh, absolutely. The verse emphasizes that this desire for wealth and the anxieties that come with it are a fundamental part of the human condition. Whether we have a lot or a little, we tend to get caught up in this cycle. So if this tendency is so ingrained in us, how do we break free from it? How do we escape this cycle of desire and suffering that seems to be tied to our very nature?
That's where the concept of avidya comes in.
Avidya?
Yeah, which essentially means ignorance. The ignorance of our true nature, the part of us that is already whole and complete beyond the need for external validation.
So it's like we're looking for happiness in all the wrong places, constantly searching for something outside ourselves when the true source of happiness actually lies within.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And understanding this ignorance, this avidya, is the first step toward breaking free from the illusion of wealth. So we're back, and we've been talking about this whole avidya thing, right? Like the ignorance of our true nature,
Yeah.
which, you know, kind of keeps us chasing these external things, thinking that they'll make us happy.
Yeah. And it's actually something that resonates a lot with modern psychology. You know, there's a growing body of research showing that, you know, beyond a certain point, material possessions don't actually make us happier.
Really? So it's not just like an ancient philosophical idea.
Yeah.
Like there's science to back this up.
Oh, yeah. There are studies showing that once our basic needs are met, you know, having more money, more possessions, it doesn't really move the needle on our happiness levels.
Huh. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So what happens instead?
Well, in some cases, it can actually lead to more stress and anxiety.
Oh, wow. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
And I guess the more you have to worry about.
Exactly.
Right, like losing it,
Yeah.
managing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it often takes us away from things that actually do matter for our well-being.
Like what kind of things?
Well, things like strong relationships, meaningful work, you know, a sense of purpose. These are things that studies show actually do contribute to well-being.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not that wealth itself is bad, right? It's more about like how we relate to it and how much we prioritize it.
Exactly. It's about our mindset.
Right. We get caught up in that wanting more, comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
And then we end up feeling empty, even when we achieve those material goals.
Yeah. It's like we're on this treadmill of never enough, always striving, always comparing.
And never quite getting there.
Right.
So if we're not supposed to be chasing after all this stuff, then what should we be focusing on?
That's the big question, right? And the Bhaja Govindam and the broader philosophy of Advaita Vedanta point us toward, self-awareness, understanding our true nature, and living in alignment with that.
So less about the outer world and more about the inner world.
Exactly.
Cultivating qualities that aren't tied to what we own or achieve externally.
Right. It's about things like compassion, gratitude, contentment, finding joy in the simple things, connecting with something larger than ourselves, and living a life of purpose.
Okay, I love that. It's definitely way more empowering than just chasing stuff. But it also sounds kind of daunting. How do we actually cultivate those qualities?
Well, that's where practices like meditation, mindfulness, self-reflection come in.
Okay.
They help us to quiet the mental chatter, to connect with our inner selves, and to gain a deeper understanding of who we truly are.
So it's not just about thinking our way out of this. It's about training our minds.
Right.
Changing our habits.
Right.
Almost like building a muscle.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination. It takes effort, but the rewards are worth it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm starting to get the picture here. But let's be real. It's easy to get caught up in like the daily grind and forget about all this stuff.
It is.
So how do we stay on track when the world is constantly shouting at us to buy more, achieve more, be more?
Yeah.
Well,
it comes down to that self-awareness we talked about.
Right.
We need to be mindful of the influences around us, question the messages that we're constantly bombarded with, and make conscious choices that align with our values, even if they go against the mainstream.
So it's not about like rejecting wealth or material things altogether.
Right. Not necessarily.
It's more about putting them in their proper place.
Yeah.
Like realizing that they're not the ultimate source of happiness.
Exactly. We can enjoy the comforts that wealth can provide, but without attachment.
No.
Without letting it define our worth or our happiness.
Right? There's that distinction again. It's not about deprivation.
Right.
It's about freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom from that constant striving, from the anxiety and the fear that come with clinging to material possessions.
It's about reclaiming our power to choose what truly matters and living a life aligned with, our deepest values and aspirations, regardless of our material circumstances.
That is so inspiring. It's like this whole conversation has kind of given me permission to let go of needing external validation.
I love that.
And just start focusing on what genuinely makes me happy.
That's what it's all about. And remember, this isn't just about individual happiness.
Oh, really?
When we shift our focus from material wealth to inner fulfillment, it ripples out into the world.
Wait, really? How does my personal happiness impact the world around me?
Well, when we're content and fulfilled, we're less driven by greed, envy, or competition.
Okay.
We're more likely to be kind, generous, compassionate to others.
So this inner shift can actually contribute to a more just and equitable world.
Precisely. When we're not constantly striving for more, we're more open to sharing what we have, focusing on the well-being of others, not just our own.
Wow, this deep dive is really making me rethink my whole perspective.
Yeah.
We've gone from ancient wisdom to modern psychology to a vision for a better world.
It's all connected.
Yeah, and it all stemmed from this one verse.
It's amazing what one little verse can spark, right? And there's still more to explore. We've laid a solid foundation, but I think it's time to shift gears a bit and delve into some practical applications.
Okay, so welcome back.
Yeah.
We've been on this fascinating journey exploring this idea that chasing wealth might not actually be the path to happiness.
Right.
And could even lead us further away from what really matters.
Yeah. And we've seen how this ancient wisdom kind of is reflected in modern psychology and even touched on how it could lead to, positive changes in society.
Exactly. So it's been pretty eye-opening. But I think, for a lot of us, it's okay, we get it. Awareness is important. But then what? What do we actually do? It feels like we're kind of swimming against the current here in a society that's, so obsessed with wealth and success.
Well, you're right. It's definitely not easy. But as we've been saying, awareness is that crucial first step.
Yes.
Recognizing the illusion and seeing how it operates in our own lives and in the world around us.
Okay, awareness check. So what's next?
Well, I think the next step is to start questioning those dominant narratives around wealth and success.
Okay.
Are they truly serving us? Or are they just keeping us stuck in a system that, benefits a few at the expense of many?
Hmm.
Think about the messages you see, in the media, in advertising, even in your own social circles.
Right.
And ask yourself, do these messages actually align with what I truly value deep down?
That's such a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in like what everyone else is doing.
Totally.
What society is telling us is important. We need to take a step back and be like, wait, what actually matters to me?
Exactly. Once you start to question those narratives, you can start making more conscious choices.
So like what kind of choices?
Well, for example, you can choose experiences over possessions. Prioritize meaningful relationships over, chasing status.
Okay.
Pursue work that aligns with your purpose, even if it doesn't bring in the biggest paycheck.
I love that. So it's about like reclaiming our power to define what a good life looks like for ourselves.
Yeah,
Not letting society dictate our values and priorities.
absolutely. That's where true freedom lies.
Yeah. This makes me think about what you said earlier about this shift, not just being about individual happiness, but having like a wider impact.
Right.
Can you talk more about that? Like how does focusing on inner fulfillment actually lead to a better world?
Well, when we're content and fulfilled, we're less driven by things like greed, envy, or the need to compete.
Okay.
So we naturally become more inclined to be kind, generous, and compassionate towards others.
That makes sense. When you're not constantly striving for more, you're more open to sharing what you have,
Yeah,
caring for the well-being of others, not just yourself.
exactly. It's like shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
I like that a lot.
Right. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that our well-being is tied to the well-being of others and the health of the planet.
Wow. So we've come full circle here. We started by exploring this ancient wisdom, about the illusion of wealth.
Right.
Then we touched on, modern psychological research, and now we're talking about, creating a better world. And it all stemmed from this one verse.
It's pretty amazing how these things connect, isn't it?
It really is. So for our listeners who are, feeling inspired by this conversation, where do they even begin?
That's a great question.
Yeah, like what are some concrete steps that they can take to start, breaking free from this illusion and start living a more fulfilling life?
Well, I think the first step is simply to notice, pay attention to how wealth and material possessions are portrayed in the world around you.
Okay.
Question those messages. Ask yourself if they align with your values.
Right.
And most importantly, cultivate practices that help you to connect with your true self.
Like what kind of practices?
Well, things like meditation, spending time in nature, nurturing close relationships, pursuing creative passions,
Yes.
Anything that brings you joy and a sense of connection.
So it's about returning to what truly matters, what makes us feel alive and connected,
Exactly.
not just to ourselves, but to something larger than ourselves.
Right. It's about remembering that true wealth isn't found in our bank accounts, but in the richness of our inner lives.
That's beautifully said. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the illusion of wealth. We hope it's inspired you to kind of question your own assumptions
Yeah.
and to start creating a life that is truly aligned with your truest self. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking that authentic happiness that resides within you.